Ever left a family gathering early just to protect your peace?
It wasn't the first time, but this time it hit different. I always tried to be understanding, tried to brush off the little comments here and there, the subtle exclusions, but this year, something inside me snapped. I'm not even sure why. Maybe it was the constant feeling that no matter how hard I tried, I was never really seen. It could have been the years of family events where I showed up, took the photos, played the role of the dutiful daughter while my siblings were the golden children. Maybe it was the annual Christmas emails that were sent out to everyone except me, telling everyone where the family trip was happening, the dates, and the locations. I'd sit there, scrolling through group texts or social media posts, looking at my family's happy photos and feeling like I was just a ghost in their lives. I guess, this year, I couldn't take it anymore. I won't pretend like I wasn't angry when my parents decided, without asking me, that this Christmas would be smaller. And when they added that, it's just going to be immediate family, a quiet holiday with the kids. We're keeping it small, without you. It wasn't a shock to hear them say it. It wasn't even new. But there was something about the way it was said this time that felt final, like they'd decided once and for all that I didn't matter. It wasn't a fight, it was a decision. An exclusion. And you know what? This time, I didn't try to convince them. I didn't try to argue or explain that I didn't mind being included. This time, I said nothing. I didn't ask why. I didn't beg. I didn't even cry. I just took a deep breath, shut my phone, and sat in the silence. And then I made my move. You'd think it would feel good to get angry like that, but in reality, it felt like a slow, steady burn. At first, it was just frustration, the kind that comes from realizing that you're not the person your parents want to be around, even though you've given them everything. And yeah, I get it. It's not the first time they've done something like this. There's always a reason. The family's busy. There's too much going on. They can't accommodate everyone. But they never even ask me anymore. It's always, "Oh, we assumed you were busy. Oh, we figured you wouldn't care." But this time, something inside me just snapped, and I realized that if they didn't care, why should I? So, I started with a travel account. It wasn't a huge thing. It wasn't some dramatic gesture, just a little thing, but it was enough to make them feel it. For years, I'd been the one setting up the travel accounts, the one who knew where the family vacation was going, who knew the passwords, who set up everything for everyone else. I did it without complaining. I did it because I loved being part of it. I loved knowing I was the one they relied on, the one they counted on. But, in a way, it always made me feel smaller. Like I was doing all the work and getting none of the credit, like I was always there in the background, quietly making sure everything was in place while everyone else got the glory. So, when they told me that Christmas was without me, I knew what I had to do. I logged into the account, the one they used to book their trips, and I took everything down. I deleted the stored credit cards, the saved destinations, the flight information. I made it clear that they wouldn't be going anywhere without me now. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't petty. It was just a message. If they didn't want me to be part of their plans, then they wouldn't have me there to help them with their plans anymore. And the best part? I didn't say a word. I didn't text them to tell them it was done. I didn't yell. I didn't even give them the satisfaction of a reason. I just closed the laptop, turned off my phone, and went about my day like nothing happened. I felt an odd mix of guilt and satisfaction. It was strange, like I had finally taken control of something that I had no control over for so long. I wasn't waiting for their approval anymore. A few hours passed, and the first missed call came through. Then another. And another. I didn't answer any of them. I wasn't ready to talk. I wasn't ready to explain myself. I wasn't going to give them the chance to make me feel guilty for something they should have already known. The voicemails started rolling in too. My mom's voice was the first, frantic, confused, trying to understand what happened to the account. What's going on? Why can't we get into the account? Please call me back. It wasn't anger. It wasn't rage. It was the sound of confusion, the kind of confusion that comes from realizing you've taken someone for granted for too long. I stared at my phone, letting it buzz with calls and notifications. The message was clear. They wanted something from me now. They needed me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I needed them. I didn't call back. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to hear the excuses. I wasn't ready to hear, "We didn't mean it that way." I wasn't ready to be their fallback anymore. I wasn't ready to be the one who always fixed things when they fell apart. So I stayed silent. And as the hours went on, I felt a strange, unexpected sense of power. The kind of power you get when you realize that you're not the only one who's been waiting for an apology. For once, I was the one who had the control. I was the one who could walk away. And that felt good. The silence stretched on. But the thing is, that silence didn't feel empty to me. It felt like freedom. It wasn't going to be over soon. I knew that. It was just the beginning. The days that followed were strange, quiet in a way that I'd never experienced before. The world didn't stop, of course, but my phone seemed to. For years, I had been the one checking in with my family, the one organizing trips, the one who was expected to be present for every small event, every little inconvenience, and now I wasn't. It felt like I had created a void, an invisible space that no one was ready to fill. They weren't ready for me to be absent, and in a way, that was the most powerful thing I'd ever felt. I'd made a decision. I took back control of something I never realized I'd lost: my time, my energy, my worth. The first couple of days were full of texts, voice messages, and missed calls. I'd glance at my phone every now and then, but I didn't touch it. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to talk about why I'd done what I did, to explain myself, to offer any excuse. And that was part of it. Part of me wanted them to feel the silence, to feel the weight of it. This wasn't just about cutting them off, it was about making them understand, finally, that I wasn't going to be the one who always cleaned up after everyone else, always took the back seat, always played second fiddle to my siblings' needs. The first message came through on the day after I'd locked them out of the travel account. My mother's voice was strained, trying to sound casual, but the uncertainty was obvious. "Hey, I don't know if you've been getting my messages, but we can't seem to get into the travel account. The link is broken or something. Can you help us out? Let me know." That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement of the fact that she and my father had excluded me from their plans. It was just about the inconvenience I'd caused by doing something they didn't understand. And that right there, that single message, was everything I needed to know. It was confirmation that they hadn't even thought about how this made me feel. Not really. It wasn't about my feelings, it was about their convenience. The days went by, and it became clear that they weren't going to give up. I think they assumed that I'd cave in after a while, that I'd give in to the guilt and pick up the phone like I always did. But something inside me was different now. I had already been the one who sacrificed. I'd been the one who always put my feelings last for the sake of family. I was always the one who stepped aside so they could have their moments, so they could do what they wanted while I watched from the edges. This time, I wasn't going to be the one who begged for a seat at the table. I was going to stay silent. I wasn't going to apologize for standing up for myself, for saying no for once. My father's voicemail came next, his tone a little harsher. "We've tried calling you, but we haven't heard back. We need you to get on the account. You know how important these trips are to us. Can you call back?" It's really frustrating. There was the frustration, the irritation that I wasn't responding to their needs the way I always had. They needed me, and I wasn't giving them what they wanted. It was a strange feeling, knowing that I held the power now, knowing that I was the one who could stop them in their tracks. But the more they called, the more I began to feel something else creeping in. Guilt. It wasn't about the decision itself, I knew why I'd done it. But as the calls piled up, as the messages and voicemails kept coming, I started to question myself. Was I being too harsh? Was I really making a point, or was I just being petty? I had to admit to myself that part of me still craved their approval, still wanted them to acknowledge that I mattered, that I was worth something in their eyes. But I wasn't going to give in. I couldn't. My siblings joined the chorus soon after. They were more direct, more personal in their messages. "Why are you doing this? We don't understand. This is stupid. Mom and Dad are freaking out. Call them." The tone of their messages was sharp, frustrated. But I couldn't help but wonder, why didn't they understand? How could they not see how tired I was of being the one who always got overlooked? How could they not see that I was fed up with pretending that everything was fine when it never really was? They were asking me to fix something that wasn't mine to fix anymore. This wasn't my problem anymore. It was around this time that I realized something else. They had no idea how to function without me. They didn't know how to handle their own lives without my help, without my constant presence, without the things I did behind the scenes to make sure everything was taken care of. They had always relied on me, and now that I had taken myself out of the equation, they were lost. They weren't angry at me, not really. They were angry at themselves, at the situation they had found themselves in. But they couldn't admit that. They couldn't admit that they needed me, that they had taken me for granted for so long. The silence grew louder. I started to feel like I was living in a different world, one where I didn't have to constantly play the role they expected of me. I didn't have to be the one who always stepped in, the one who always forgave, the one who always allowed myself to be overlooked. For the first time in my life, I felt free. And I had to admit that it felt good. It felt good to have a choice, to take control of my own narrative. But even as the guilt tried to creep in, even as I struggled with the pull of family loyalty, I knew I couldn't go back. Not this time. I had drawn a line. And for once, I wasn't going to be the one who crossed it. As the calls kept coming, unanswered, and the voicemails piled up, I couldn't help but wonder if they'd ever understand. But it didn't matter anymore. They were the ones who had to figure it out, not me. I wasn't the one who had failed them. It wasn't my job to fix it. For once, it was their turn to deal with the consequences. And for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that. It's strange, the way guilt and satisfaction can coexist. At first, the silence felt empowering, like I had finally done something that was all about me, and not for anyone else. But as the days passed and the messages kept rolling in, it started to feel like a weight. Not a heavy one, but one that lingered there, a constant reminder of the actions I had taken and what they meant. They weren't just ignoring me anymore. They were actively trying to get me back. And the more they tried, the more I started to feel something I hadn't expected: guilt. It wasn't about what I had done. It wasn't about the decision to shut them out. It was about what that meant for me and for the relationship we had, or rather, the one I had always hoped we would have. When my father's voicemail came through that day, there was a distinct shift in his tone. It wasn't the frustration or the irritation I had heard before. There was something different in his voice, something more personal, almost pleading. "I don't know what's going on, but this isn't like you. What happened? What did we do wrong? You've always been there for us. Please call me. We need to fix this." It was a stark contrast to the earlier messages. This wasn't just about the travel account anymore. It was about me, about him realizing that his daughter was no longer there, no longer the person who would always make things right. And that realization? It hit me harder than I expected. I didn't know if I was supposed to feel proud of myself, or if I was supposed to feel guilty for making him feel that way. The guilt crept in slowly, but it didn't feel like it used to. In the past, guilt would have eaten at me. I would have given in, called them back, explained myself, apologized, and gone back to being the good daughter who put up with everything. But this time, something was different. I wasn't going to give in. I wasn't going to let them make me feel small anymore. The more they called, the more I began to understand how much they had relied on me without ever realizing it. They depended on me to do the things they couldn't, or wouldn't, do themselves. They relied on me to handle their messes, to fix things when they got too complicated, to be the person they could always count on, without ever acknowledging how much that took out of me. And as I sat there, listening to their increasingly desperate voicemails, I realized that they had no idea what it felt like to not be the one holding everything together. The more they tried to get me to respond, the more I started to feel victorious, in a way. But it wasn't about revenge anymore, not really. It wasn't about getting back at them for the years of neglect. It wasn't about punishing them for making me feel invisible. It was about something bigger. It was about me standing up for myself, about finally saying, I'm worth more than this. I'm not going to keep bending over backwards for people who don't even notice when I'm gone. But even as I sat there, listening to their calls, watching the unanswered messages pile up, I couldn't help but wonder, what did they want from me? Did they really want an explanation? Did they really care? Or were they just worried about the inconvenience? They weren't upset because they missed me, not at first. They were upset because they couldn't access their damn account, because their Christmas plans were falling apart. The truth was, they weren't ready for the consequences of their actions. They weren't ready to face the reality that I had finally done something for myself, something that didn't involve them, and that scared them. They were scared because they realized that they had been taking me for granted for so long, and now they didn't know how to get me back. The guilt kept creeping in, but I ignored it. I knew that if I gave in now, if I called them back and explained myself, it would be like I'd never taken a stand. It would be like I was admitting that I didn't deserve the space I was carving out for myself. And I couldn't do that. I couldn't let them win this time. The satisfaction, though, that was harder to ignore. It felt good to not be the one chasing after them, begging for attention, begging for their approval. It felt good to finally take control, to realize that I didn't need them to make me feel important. For the first time in my life, I was in charge of my own narrative. I was no longer the person who waited for scraps. I was the person who walked away, who said, I don't need to put myself through this anymore. But it wasn't easy. No matter how much I tried to push the guilt down, it lingered. Every time my father's voice came through on the voicemail, every time my mother's name flashed on the screen, asking me to call, I felt that tug in my chest. They were my parents, after all. They were the people who had raised me, the people who should have been the first to see how much I was worth. But they never did. They never even noticed how much I gave, how much I sacrificed. And now, when I finally said no, when I finally stood up for myself, they were the ones who didn't know how to handle it. They were the ones who felt lost without me. And I couldn't lie, it felt good. It felt good to finally have something they wanted. It felt good to know that I wasn't just invisible anymore. I wasn't just the background player. I was the one in control now. And even though the guilt kept nudging at me, telling me I was being too harsh, that I should reach out, that I should make things right, I knew that I couldn't. Not yet. Not when I had finally found the strength to stand up for myself. They would have to figure it out without me. And for once, I was okay with that. I didn't need their approval to feel good about myself. I was finally doing something for me. And that, in itself, was worth more than any apology they could ever give me. By now, the calls had stopped coming. The messages were fewer, their tone shifting from desperate to resigned, as if they had finally realized that no amount of pleading or guilt-tripping was going to bring me back into the fold. But that didn't make it easier to stay quiet. As the days passed and the silence stretched on, I started to wonder if I had taken things too far. The guilt that I had been fighting back so fiercely for so long was starting to feel more like a constant companion, whispering doubts into my ear, making me second-guess everything I had done. Was this really about standing up for myself, or had I just let my anger take control? I couldn't help but think back to the moment I had decided to make them feel what I had felt for so many years, the isolation, the disregard. At that moment, it had felt like justice. But now, with the silence weighing on me, I was starting to feel like I had overplayed my hand. But the thing was, I couldn't go back. I couldn't undo what I had done. I couldn't pretend that everything was okay, that I could just pick up the phone and slide back into the role they had always expected of me. The truth was, I didn't want to. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I didn't need them to apologize. I didn't need them to beg me to come back. What I needed was for them to understand that I was no longer willing to be their safety net, the one they took for granted, the one they could rely on without ever having to give anything in return. I needed them to see that my absence wasn't just a consequence of their actions, it was a statement. The message from my mother came through a few days later, but it was different this time. It wasn't an angry text or a pleading voicemail. This time, it was a simple message, almost detached. We're having Christmas dinner at the house. Your siblings will be there. We're all hoping you'll join us. Please let us know if you change your mind. It was the first time in a long while that I had felt like my absence truly mattered to them. They weren't just upset about their plans being ruined anymore. They were starting to realize that I was a part of the family, that I was someone who had always been there and who had always been expected to play a part, whether I wanted to or not. But there was something else in that message that made me stop for a second. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an acknowledgement of the fact that they had excluded me in the first place. It was just a vague invitation, like nothing had happened, like they were waiting for me to return to my place as if nothing had changed. And that was the moment I realized something that I had been avoiding for a while. This wasn't just about the travel account or the Christmas plans. This was about my relationship with them, my entire relationship with my family. I had spent my whole life bending over backward to make sure they were happy, to make sure everything ran smoothly, and they never once stopped to ask if I was happy, if I was okay. And now, when I finally took a step back, when I finally decided to stop playing along, they were confused. They didn't know how to handle it. They didn't know what to do without me there to keep the gears of the family turning. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of guilt again. I knew that I was hurting them, that they were feeling the weight of my absence. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that they needed to feel it. They needed to feel what it was like to be the ones scrambling, the ones who had to adjust, the ones who had to work for something they had always taken for granted. And that's when I knew that I couldn't go back. Not yet, anyway. Not until they understood that I was not going to be the person I had always been, the one who cleaned up everyone's messes, the one who quietly endured their neglect, their favoritism, and their emotional distance. I didn't respond to the message. I didn't call. I didn't do anything. And that, in itself, felt like a victory. It felt like the first time in my life that I was doing something for me. I was no longer chasing their approval, no longer fighting to be seen or heard. I was just existing. I was letting them figure it out. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I didn't need them to validate me. I didn't need to go back to the family gathering, to sit at that table and pretend that everything was fine. I didn't need them to tell me that they loved me, because I had learned to love myself in a way that they never could. And then, just as I was settling into the quiet of my decision, my phone buzzed again. It was another voicemail from my father. But this time, it was different. There was no frustration, no anger, no confusion. Just a simple message: we're all here. It's not the same without you. That was it. That was all he said. And in that moment, I knew that they finally understood. They understood that I wasn't the one who needed to change. I wasn't the one who had to come crawling back. I was the one who had finally set a boundary, one they couldn't ignore. And while part of me still felt a little guilty, like I was tearing something apart, the other part of me knew that this was the only way to make them see me. To make them realize that I had value, that I mattered, that I was worth something beyond just being the person who always picked up the pieces. The moment of truth had come, and I had made my decision. I wasn't going to be the one who always forgave. I wasn't going to be the one who always put everyone else first. I was going to be the person who stood up for herself, no matter the consequences. And in the end, that was all I needed to know. It's funny how things work out sometimes, how you can go through your whole life feeling like you're invisible, like you're just the background noise in everyone else's lives, and then, one day, you stop playing that role. You stop showing up when everyone expects you to. You stop answering the calls, you stop being the one who fixes things, and you finally realize that you've been doing all the heavy lifting while everyone else got to take the credit. For years, I had been the one to clean up the messes, the one who made sure the trips were planned, the one who was expected to be there, no matter what. But in the end, it was my absence, my silence, that spoke louder than anything I had ever done. It took me a long time to realize that my worth didn't come from how much I gave to others. It didn't come from how much I sacrificed. My worth came from who I was, from the fact that I had the right to exist without constantly proving my value. And once I figured that out, it became impossible to go back. The Christmas dinner came and went, and I knew that my absence was felt, but I wasn't there to witness it. I didn't need to see their empty seat at the table, the awkwardness that I had always felt, the moments where I was expected to laugh at the same jokes, to play along with the same routine. The routine that always made me feel small. I didn't need to see them scrambling to figure out what to do without me. I didn't need to hear their excuses or their half-hearted attempts at making things normal again. The truth was, things weren't normal. They hadn't been for a long time, and I wasn't going to pretend that they were anymore. But the thing about taking control is that it's not always as satisfying as you think it will be. In the moment, it feels empowering. You feel like you've finally done something for yourself, something that no one can take away from you. But then the silence sets in, and you start to wonder if you did the right thing. You wonder if the people you love are really better off without you, if they're really feeling the absence the way you thought they would. It's hard to ignore the little voice inside your head that tells you that you've gone too far, that maybe you should call, that maybe it's time to make peace. But that's where I had to stop myself. I couldn't call them back. I couldn't give them the satisfaction of thinking that I was going to be the one to repair the rift. I had already done that for too long. This time, they had to figure it out on their own. The last voicemail from my father came through a few days after Christmas, and it was different from the others. This time, there was no anger, no frustration, just a quiet, almost resigned tone. I don't know what happened between us. I don't know what I did to make you feel this way. But I want you to know that we miss you. We always have, and we always will. I hope you come back to us when you're ready. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully understood until then. This wasn't about me punishing them. It was about me showing them what it felt like to be the one who had always been ignored, to be the one who had always been expected to do the work without any recognition. It was about me taking back the power I had given away for so long. But it was also about me understanding that I didn't need them to validate my worth anymore. I had finally learned to value myself, to recognize that I didn't need to bend over backwards for anyone, not even for the people who were supposed to love me the most. I didn't call him back. I didn't respond to the message. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. I had already done what I needed to do. The silence, the absence, it was my final move, and it was enough. I didn't have to fix things for them. I didn't have to make them feel better about the situation. I had taken the first step in a long time toward putting myself first, and that was all I needed. As the days went on, I realized that I hadn't lost anything by standing my ground. In fact, I had gained something, my self-respect. I had finally stopped living for other people's expectations, stopped trying to prove that I was worthy of love and attention. I had stopped waiting for them to recognize my worth, and in doing so, I had found a deeper sense of freedom than I had ever known. There's a certain kind of peace that comes from finally standing up for yourself, from finally putting yourself first. And it's not always easy. It doesn't always feel like a victory at first, but eventually, you realize that it's the most important thing you can do. I hadn't just taken something from them, I had given myself something I had been missing for years: the freedom to live on my own terms. The freedom to stop playing the role I had been cast in, to stop being the one who always fixed things, to stop being the one who always made everyone else feel better. And when I finally realized that, when I finally understood that I didn't need anyone's approval to feel whole, I knew that I had one. I didn't need them to apologize. I didn't need them to call me. What mattered was that I had finally stopped being the person they took for granted. I had stopped being the one who always picked up the pieces. And that was the most powerful thing I could have ever done for myself.